Hi, I'm Fletcher Carpenter, and I'm here to talk about one of the questions I get asked most frequently, which is about how those TV judges do what they do. And it actually does apply in some cases to personal injury claims. So I'm excited to talk about it. I actually have done a little research on this, and it's kind of interesting. They find these people by showing up at a courthouse, maybe a small claims courthouse in California, and they just send a producer down there. They start asking people what they're doing there, what kind of lawsuit they're looking to file. And if the person looks interesting and has an interesting personality and is filing an interesting lawsuit, they might be invited to join one of these shows. And they sign what would technically be considered a binding arbitration agreement to get on the show. And what that means is the person filing the lawsuit will sign an agreement that says Judge Judy or whoever else can make a determination about who gets money, and they will agree that that's going to be binding and that they can't appeal that or anything like that. The opposing side, the defendant in these cases, is given a pretty sweet deal as well. The studio will offer to pay all or most of any potential judgment against them, and they won't have a lawsuit filed against them if they agree to this binding arbitration. And then both sides will be given a little bit of money to show up on the show. And then Judge Judy does make a determination about who's going to get the money, and that will go to one side or the other, whatever's in dispute there, and the studio will cover that. So everybody ends up happy. We get to watch some interesting disputes, and we get to see Judge Judy make some fun legal rulings. And neither side has a lawsuit on their record, and they both get some money. In terms of whether the laws she's applying are valid, in an arbitration, I've been appointed by the court to be an arbitrator, and when I'm appointed as an arbitrator, I have to follow the law. There's rules of evidence that I have to follow. If the parties don't like my ruling, they can appeal that and go to an actual judge and get a jury trial. In these TV judge arbitrations, they don't actually have to follow the law, and in fact, a lot of those judges are making these films in jurisdictions where they've never been licensed to practice law. So it's unclear whether they even know the laws of their jurisdiction. But most of the rulings have some logic behind them, so it's not like they're out of hand. For some people, they might think that sounds like a pretty good idea, a pretty good gig to go on the show, and you save a bunch of attorney's fees. You show up, it's kind of fun, you air your grievances, and this TV judge makes a decision. And you might be wondering whether you'd have access to that. And the truth is, a lot of the contracts you sign when you sign up to go to the gym or you buy something from a car dealer or something like that, a lot of those contracts have a provision in there where it says you're agreeing to arbitrate your claims. And you're going to arbitrate in front of somebody who's not a judge. And it might be a binding arbitration, and there's no appeal or anything like that available. And so in a certain sense, a lot of the disputes you might have could end up in an arbitration, a lot like the TV arbitrations, except there's no guaranteed payment to both sides, and a studio's not going to be covering any potential judgment, but it would be a much faster process than going to a court. Now, depending on which side you're on, the arbitration may or may not be good for you. A lot of people feel that contractual arbitration agreements like that are bad for consumers because the arbitrators, they get most of their volume from the corporations that have the contracts in place. And so some people feel like these arbitrators tend to favor the people who are giving them all their business, so to speak. On the other hand, you can force one of these companies into arbitration, and it will cost you a lot less than going to court. So depending on the nature of your claim, arbitration is not necessarily bad, but you're not going to get some large verdict for an injury, for example, from an arbitrator. That just doesn't happen in arbitration. Now, in the personal injury world, arbitration clauses usually don't come up because it's not like you have a contract with the person who just slammed into your car. But the one area where it does frequently come up is in nursing home abuse cases. A lot of times nursing homes will ask their patients or the patient's caregivers to sign arbitration clauses where they agree to waive their right to a jury trial and submit their case to an arbitration. A lot of times those are invalid for various reasons. Depends on how competent the patient was when he or she was entering the nursing home. Sometimes it's better to be in arbitration in those cases. Sometimes it's better to not. And we just have to look at each case on a case-by-case basis and review that. Another situation where they come up is sometimes you're injured in a facility, like a premises liability type case. Maybe you were at the gym and some equipment was broken or something and you got seriously injured that way. We have to look at the clauses. We got to see what happened when it was signed and decide whether or not the arbitration clause was valid. So if you've been injured and you think your potential claim might be subject to arbitration, you're always welcome to try one of those TV judges. They might not take your call, but here at Allen Carpenter, we do take our calls, and we're happy to talk to you about your potential case that might be involving arbitration, whether it's nursing home or some other facility that might be subject to an arbitration clause.